Welcome to the Georgia Archives and our first lunch and learn for the new year. I am Sigourney Smuts. I'm the conservator here at the Georgia Archives. As you may be aware, Penny Clerk has unfortunately left us for Clayton State. So we are just standing in to assist with the programming until we can find hopefully somebody capable of filling a very large shoes. Our monthly lunch and learn program is sponsored by the Friends of the Georgia Archives and History, so thank you to FOGA. And FOGA has a new brochure which is on the back table as well as a donation box. And there's also a donate button on our website if you'd like to donate to the Georgia Archives. After this presentation, if you want to go to reference to do research or look around to see what we have, and you do not have a research card, you can go down to the welcome desk to sign up, and it's free and it's 55 years. If you do have a researcher's card, please make sure you go to the security at the front just to sign. And today we are happy to welcome our speaker, Dr. William H. Bailey. And firstly, we'll be doing the door prize. So if you will do the honors. Door prizes today. It's so cute.
We'll do it. We'll read out. We'll do one at a time.
776876.
That's me.
Every time.
That's hilarious. You have all of them?
He has that one. Okay, I'll take care of you later. Is that okay? Okay. This will be for the stealing the general. 958249. Congratulations. Excellent work. And this one will be for Vanishing Georgia. 776871. All right. You'll pass that back?
Y'all already have that one too? Yeah, they have that.
They have
Oh, you do? Hey, well, okay.
That's the other part.
And last one is cycling through Georgia.
I'll take care of you too later. We'll let you come from the room. All right, now this one will be for Vanishing Georgia.
Okay.
Second door. 776875.
Are you?
And the next one is for that world-renowned book. Susan Hunter Publishing did this back in the 80s, and this one was the red one in the blue-green series. So not that great a story is fantastic. This is 776877. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you. In the back.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
We've already just. I'm sorry.
Where we were. Dr. Bill Bailey is a retired professional geographer who resides in Auburn, Alabama. He has a Bachelor of Arts and a Master's degree from the University of Georgia, as well as a doctoral degree from the University of Tennessee.
Go Dogs, though.
You got to be faithful.
Right.
He is a U.S. Army veteran with experience as an educator in university and K-12 positions. He also is an avid bicycle tourist, especially along historical routes, and has been published in numerous bicycle touring publications. So welcome, Bill, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? I always get nervous in front of a first time to do this because I remember when I was teaching my first class at Auburn, even though I taught before, I went in there that first day. It was an amphitheater type of room. And, you know, you want to have a good impression on first impression on your students. So I had it all lined up and I was giving them that A+ speech. And all of a sudden I noticed that this guy up in the back was just running his mouth, you know, And I kept giving him nonverbal cues to stop, but he just kept going. So finally I said, excuse me, if you think you can do a better job than me, why don't you come on down here and do it? Well, he got up and he started down there. So I said, okay, I'll play this game. So I went over and sat down with the other students, and he got up and said, class dismissed. So that didn't really happen, but it was a good story. I'm sure we'll have a great concentration today. If you'll bear with me, I'd like to just read some things and get on with it. How many of you know a great deal about the Andrews rate? How many of you are not real well versed on the Andrews rate? Okay, so part of the talk will be about that. And how many of you ride bicycles? Okay, all right, good. A lot of it will be about that. Okay, a failed covert military operation in 1862 during the American Civil War gives rise to a bicycle touring route in Georgia. Smuggler and spy James Andrews led 22 enlisted Union Army soldiers and 1 civilian, all Ohioans, to interrupt movements of armaments by railroad from Atlanta to the Confederate Army in Chattanooga. Their method was to commandeer a train and use it to destroy bridges along the Western and Atlantic Railroad, connecting the two cities. Now, why do this? The purpose for identifying and describing this bicycling route is multifold. If you'll look on the back, did everybody get one of these? Oh, could I have those maps that you drew? Just give me what you've got. Just pass them over and then pass them up. I'll pass these out. And this is two-sided. So I'll refer to each side. The extras. Any extras? Extras for you. All right. Did your map look like that one? So the purpose is multifold. Kids need heroes. If you'll turn to the back of your map, see a reference to Mike Higgins, right? Even though I already know that, I was reminded by an article that he wrote where he said that about riding bicycles and over historic routes. So kids need heroes. The first recipients of the Medal of Honor were members of the Andrews Raid. Okay. All right. Second, one should publish their ideas or they will perish with you. That second reference on the back of the map about Dr. Karen. We always talked about, gosh, we got to publish or what? And he said, well, if you don't publish your ideas, they'll perish with you. I thought that was a good way of seeing that. So as a professional geographer and an avid adventure cyclist, I view tracing the route of the Andrews Raid on a bicycle as an opportunity, one, to reconstruct a historical event of enduring significance, two, to explore natural and human environments, geography, and three, explore a natural and human environments of a section of contemporary Georgia and have fun doing it. Do you think they're having fun? They were having a ball. That was on a trip we took from Atlanta to Savannah on Sherman's March to the Sea. Okay, so In an Adventure Cyclist article in May of 2022, the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Carolyn Whelan, pointed out that cyclists, especially her members, need to help one another as bike travelers. So one way to do that is to develop meaningful bicycle touring routes that engender opportunities to learn about people, places, and events, both historical and contemporary. This route is easily accessible to a broad range of touring cyclists and is particularly recommended for teachers and students from middle school to higher education, especially teachers that teach physical education and teachers who teach Georgia history or U.S. history. So I've had the opportunity to do some of those trips, and they're a lot of fun. The story of the Andrews raid may be divided into three parts. It didn't mean that's the only thing you can do it, but I divided it into three parts. One, the raiders' arduous journey from their Union Army encampment near Shelbyville, Tennessee, to Marietta. All right, that's a great story. Second is the Great Locomotive Chase. Okay, the Andrews raid, the part that involves the trains. And three, the plight of the raiders subsequent to their failed mission. And that's a great story. Now, each segment of the story will engage even the most casual student of history. But this essay focuses on the chase route as a context for geography and other types of teaching. A plethora of books. Do you say plethoras or plethora? You know, I get confused about that. Plethora is singular and plethoras is plural. But when you type in plethora of books, it comes up with a line under it with words. So anyway, I just said, well, a plethora. That means an exhaustive list of articles and media have been published about the Andrews raid, even in orchestral composition. Have any of you heard that? Oh, you're in for a treat. If I can find out how to do this. Let's see, let me go back to this. Yes. Two minutes of this. Look at your map. Peaceful ride from Marietta up to Kennesaw, Big Shanty. They just stole the train. Okay, so I was fascinated by that. I discovered that when I was putting this together, and the fact that it was really written so that middle school orchestras could play it. So fits that Georgia history theme perfectly. Okay, two definitive books about the complete story of the Andrews Raid, one by Russell Bonds, Stealing the General, door prize today. Now, this has a lot more information in it that I'm interested in because he talks about, he's a Georgia Tech guy, and he talks about the engines and all of their technology and all, but he also talks about all three parts of the story, okay? So highly recommend this book. And then William Pittenger, who was one of the raiders, 6 chapters in the Bonds book and 4 in Pittenger's describe the locomotive chase in detail. The Bonds book is readily available at the gift shop inside the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History in Kennesaw. Just call Michelle at the gift shop. She'll ring you right up. I think the hardbound copies are out of print now. Would you be sure to tell her I gave her a boost? Thank you. She's a nice lady. And the other one is the 1893, think now, 31 years later, okay? 1893 edition of Pittenger's book is available to read online at google.com/books. I was fascinated to find out what's available there for free. Now, my studies during high school in Hapeville and visits to the Atlanta Cyclorama and Civil War Museum sparked my interest in the Andrews Raid. The research of historical accounts and travel by car along the chase route during subsequent decades revealed many details of the story's 3 parts. Touring the route by bicycle, however, continues to enhance my understanding of the chase, especially the area through which it occurred, in a uniquely adventurous and enjoyable way. Can do the same for you. So a geographer and adventure cyclist, I think it fit those 2 goals. By the way, at Hapeville, we had a visiting teacher. Gosh, I can't remember his name, but he retired as a history professor at Kennesaw State a few years ago. But he would dress up, you know, like Napoleon and stuff like that, you know, whatever he was teaching about. And he told us about 2 of the raiders who built a raft and went down the Chattahoochee to Pensacola, to the blockade, the Union blockade, and either rowed a boat out and swam to the boats and were rescued. And one of them even came back to be with Sherman in 1864. And it's a fascinating story, but not nearly so much an impact on me as it was on Eddie Hudson. You probably, Perry Hudson Boulevard, that was his dad. Eddie Hudson and Doug Stanford, because they and a couple of other kids under their influence went down to the river. They had a raft they built and they tried to duplicate it, but they washed out at Columbus. Thank goodness. But they disappeared for about a week. Nobody knew where they went. So they paid attention in class and took a guy up on it. You know, fascinating to me. By the way, Eddie is he lives in Saskatchewan, Canada. And while he was in the Army, he parachuted out of a helicopter in Panama, where he was a veterinarian. And to keep his wings, he had to make a jump periodically. And I asked him, I said at one of our reunions, I said, gosh, you know, what were you thinking about? And but he's a big kid. And he said, I was thinking about all those things that they told me to think about. That happened. But he hid in the jungle canopy, and it broke his fall, but he broke a lot of bones. And interesting guy. That sounds like him, you know, build a raft and jump out of a helicopter. So while you're planning your ride, if you're going to do this, take a virtual tour using Google Maps to peruse the route and points of interest that I'm going to describe in here. Note the proximity of the route to the railway, other roadways, terrain patterns, they even have a terrain layer, and services. You know, if you're going to camp, if you're going to stay at a hotel, if you want something to eat, you're not far off of the beaten track on this, use a pun, if you follow this route, because I-75 and US 41, and then other roads, which were probably there during the raid, they parallel the railroad. So you're not too far off from services, and that includes 911. So you got the trifecta. You got the article to lead you. You have the directions. I have detailed directions, which I will be glad to furnish to you. I'll give you my card before you leave. And if you're interested in the turns, where to go so you can stay on the right track, you can have them in Google Maps. You even have photos, street scenes. So let's talk about Marietta to Kennesaw, or at the time, Big Shanty. By bicycle, it's 6.6 miles. The route begins at the Welcome Center and the Kennesaw House in Marietta. I don't know if you know much about Marietta. I always ask people who are from Marietta, I say, where are you from? And they'll say, Marietta. I know they're from the north. If they say Marietta, I know they're natives, So several, there's 60,000 people in there in 2020 census. So a bustling metro Atlanta suburb, seat of the Cobb County government. Several notable sites close to the start of the bicycle route are as follows. Marietta Square. It's a busy place rimmed by shopping, entertainment, and eating establishments, as well as city and county government offices. In the rear of the buildings, between the western side of the square and the railroad, is the Marietta Welcome Center. Let's see, I believe that I can go to, might help me out here. Okay. I just want to be sure I don't get us lost. I guess it says P, that's PowerPoint, right? Yeah, okay. All right, I got it. I think so. Is that it? Is that? You're too good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, here are the references that I made, and there's the citation for Bond's book and for Pittenger's. It's on the back of your map. There's that one. And so we're going to go to all these points: Kennesaw, Ackworth, Emerson, Cartersville, Kingston, which is a little off the I-75 route, but it's on the rail route. Adairsville, Calhoun, Resaca, Dalton, Tunnel Hill, Ringgold, and the end. Okay, and then Chattanooga is up here a few miles away, and we'll visit a place there too. And then of course here's Atlanta. And here's the detailed example of the detailed directions. Ride north from the Kennesaw House along the Mountain to River Trail that parallels the railroad to Kennesaw Avenue. At Polk Street, cross the tracks to continue on the trail. Then you get to Kennesaw Avenue, take a left. Okay. Let's see now. If I want to get back to the Google Maps, how do I do that? I'll learn this right quick. She taught me once, but I have to go back over it. Oh, I got you. Okay. Thank you so much.
It's not showing up though.
I got it. You just need to type Marietta. Yeah, put this. Thank you.
It's not showing up over here.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to.
Oh, okay.
It's not it either. Nope.
No, it's not that one. Let's see. Let me see. That one's not showing up there. Okay.
Actually, let's go here.
All right, there it is.
I'll stay.
Okay, so let me type in Marietta. It didn't work. Let's see. The what? Oh, okay. All right, let's see. Marietta. Okay, so we go to Marietta. I can find there it is. Marietta Square. You all are familiar with Marietta Square, and a lot of you are. Hey, Sawhouse. Okay. So here's the railroad right here. And then on this side, there's a path, and you go to Oak Street. You got to go across the track and stay on the Mountain to River Trail, and then you get to Kennesaw Avenue. And these are just examples now. And you just come over here, and you're riding through that kind of neighborhood when the trail gives out, okay, on the road with cars. But if you want to, you can get over on the sidewalk. Just watch out for people backing out. But it's a lovely, Kennesaw Avenue is a lovely avenue through some old houses that they have restored, historical preservation. It's a nice thing. Okay, so that. So those kinds of description, those kinds of directions keep you on the right path to a safe journey. All right, there's the Kennesaw House. Right there on the second floor is where, in that corner room is where Andrews and the Raiders met the night, actually the early morning that they stole the train, okay, which was April 12th, 1862. And as Gordon reminded me, that was the anniversary of the attack on Sumter. But remember that Andrews was a day late because he really intended to be there on Friday. So maybe he didn't think about that when he was doing that. He was too busy thinking about making some money anyway, because he was a spy civilian and probably for both sides. Okay, so then the Marietta Welcome Center. And then the next thing you do is there's a view of what the walking and biking trail looks like. Looks pretty safe. There are no cars on there, which is the same thing. Oh, good. I'm sorry. Which is the same thing the bikers say about the, there's no cars. But that's the same thing that the pedestrians say if there are no bikes. They see us as a menace. So anyway, two cemeteries of note are located near the Welcome Center. Became the Marietta Confederate Cemetery, received its first soldier burials in 1863. Most of those did probably from Chickamauga, which occurred in 1863. Battle. The Marietta National Cemetery was established in 1867 for the dead of both the Confederate and Union armies. However, Marietta citizens balked at burying of Confederate and Union dead in the same place. Consequently, the Confederate cemetery was expanded. They were losing. So you can ask in the Welcome Center for directions to each cemetery. And then one of the things I really am fascinated about Marietta is the Leo Frank case. Raise your hand if you know about that. Yeah, and that's where a judge in Marietta, kicked the table out from under him to hang him, So it's kind of a gruesome story. There's a book by Steve Oney, who was a UGA journalism major, and he worked at the LA Times when he wrote this book. But it's fascinating. It is history, though. It's not written like a newspaper article, but really good. All right, after midnight on the day of the raid, the raiders met at the Fletcher Hotel, now named the Kennesaw House. Sure, right there. They were going to review their plans, and he gave them an opportunity to back out, but they didn't. The room where they met is in artifacts associated with the raid. Dan Cox, raise your hand if you know who he was. All right, he always ask that so I don't say something stupid. He was the founder of that museum and eventually got it expanded. Now, do you know what his fate was? Is he still around? Still around. But I remember I met him years ago, and I had a small group of people from the Hapeville Historical Society. It's a field trip. And I had with me my now 29-year-old grandson. He was in middle school. And I remember how great Mr. Cox was with him. He showed him everything in there, let him pull the saber out, all this stuff. It was really cool. So I remember more about him than I do about the room. Right, I'm sure he's retired. I mean, you have to be, but a great guy. He was, I think he operated it until 2016. Maybe retired then. So visit the room and visualize the raiders' mental and physical conditions. They were posing as civilians. They had just endured 4 exhausting days infiltrating deeply into Confederate territory. They were not well acquainted with one another or with their civilian leader, Andrews. They were from different groups within that outfit in Shelbyville. They would sleep for only several hours before boarding the train that they would soon commandeer. They came from Chattanooga down on the same train that they were going to catch going back. And they were armed only with revolvers. And dressed as civilians, they were subject to execution as spies if they were caught. So around 5:15 in the morning, this is according to Bond's book, the 20 raiders boarded the northbound Atlanta to Chattanooga train pulled by the general, the locomotive general. And it was raining all day during the trip, and the raiders did not raise suspicion among other passengers of the train crew, perhaps, as they could have been headed to Confederate Army Camp McDonald, which was a training facility at Big Shanty, or Kennesaw as it's called now. So, and that's the first stop north of Marietta. All right, the cycling route then begins along the Mountain to River Trail, a paved walking and bicycling path for a short distance before turning into Kennesaw Avenue. The secondary street passes through a neighborhood of historic houses and newer upscale housing developments near Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. The park preserves the place where Confederate and Union armies sustained over 4,000 casualties in one day of battle during Sherman's Atlanta campaign in 1864. He came down the railroad. Okay, so you're going to run into that on this trip. You're going to run into examples or evidence of Sherman. The Mountain to River Trail resumes for a couple of miles along the edge of the park. So it looks like that. I'm sure some of you have been on that scene right there. Evidence of how traffic and residential and commercial developments are endangering this hallowed place is obvious along the section of the route. So it's a big deal. People want to live near the park, and people that want the park don't want people living there. It's money talks, I guess. From the end of the Mountain to River Trail beyond the park, traffic can be kind of busy along the route into Kennesaw. But as long as it's not zipping by, as long as it kind of tailgate to tailgate, it's pretty safe for a bicycler. At least I found that way. I'm 78 and I go right there in a heartbeat. So just have to forget my Army lingo when they get too close. But anyway, we do have that 3-foot rule, so you have to take your cell phone and call the cops. At Big Shanty, while the passengers and crew went into the trackside Lacey Hotel for breakfast, this is old hat for some of you, the raiders uncoupled the mail and passenger cars, leaving 3 wooden boxcars and the tender car and the general. Okay, so Andrews and 3 of the raiders boarded the engine, and he had picked somebody that knew how to run the engine. And 16 raiders, remember there are 24 to start. So 16 raiders climbed into the last boxcar. So there's 20 of them. So at 6 a.m., the 20 raiders were off stealing the general. Alerted that his train was moving away from Big Shanty, conductor William Fuller, who I understand was from Morrow. Who told me that? Yes, yes, thank you. I had heard that before, now I remember. Abruptly left his breakfast and ran after the train along the track. 2 Western and Atlantic men joined him in the foot chase. So, was he a hero? No, you pick your own heroes. You know, Andrews was not a hero to me. The 16 Raiders or the 20 Raiders were. So, you know, we all need heroes. We all need to think about that. Who are our heroes? Was Stonewall Jackson a hero? Well, some people say he wasn't, and some people say he was, you know, but it depends. Okay, so several must-see attractions are within easy walking distance from the intersection of Cherokee Street and Main Street in Kennesaw. East across the railroad on Cherokee Street, well, it's the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History. And the general is on display there, along with a lot of photographs and other artifacts associated with the raid. But the best thing, I think, is outside of the museum, other than the gift shop. It's interesting to go through that for me. But I wanted to take a picture with my bicycle there, and they wouldn't let me. But I finally figured out how to get a picture on the inside. And it looked so much like the ones that they had in their brochures that when I wrote them a note asking if it was okay to use this picture, they said, well, did you get it from our files? I said, no, but you can have this one if you'd like to have it. But I mean, the law is what it is. You know, people have to be careful about that. Ask the museum staff about how the general came to be housed in the museum. It's a great story. Why 4 of the original 20 raiders did not participate in the raid. They'll know that. And about 2 rather quirky things in Kennesaw, don't take offense. One is a city law requiring every head of household residing in the city to maintain a firearm. Is that still true? Yeah. And about Wild Man's Civil War surplus store. And is it still there? Yeah. Right, right. I will not talk about Wild Man out of respect for the dead, but he and I did not get along. Museum staff will point out the exact site where the Lacey Hotel was located. Stand at the site and visualize the thousands of Confederate Army recruits training a stone's throw away at Camp McDonald. The train crew and passengers eating breakfast, and the raiders maneuvering to steal the train. All of that going on. Follow the pedestrian path through the tunnel under the railroad track. That's actually coming from Main Street. Go through and peruse the markers whose text and paintings by Wilbur Kurtz illustrate key aspects of the raid all the way up. A very interesting artwork and display. Kurtz to Fuller. Yes, Kurtz was his son-in-law. Did you know that? We have exchanged, that's what we call connections. I love that. It's the best thing about this. Isn't that what you guys want at this place? All right. Okay. I'd heard that a long time ago, and I had to look it up last night. In fact, I wrote myself a note. So, being Mr. Smarty up here. In fact, I'm amazed at what I learn every time I ride this route. I learn more and more stuff. Okay. Now, from Big Shanty or Kennesaw to Moon's Station is 2.5 miles by bicycle. So the raiders stopped at Moon Station to borrow from an unsuspecting railroad maintenance crew a tool to dislodge rails further along on the route. Let's see. Here we go. Right, there's the historical marker posted at Moon's Station. And so after they got that, they left, and a short distance beyond Moon Station, the raiders stopped again to cut the telegraph wire. There was no telegraph at Big Shanty, so Andrews knew they'd have to go all the way back to Marietta to telegraph what had happened. to the Confederates further north, and to obstruct the track, a process they would repeat when possible along the way. So when Fuller got there with the other two guys, the maintenance crew told him that Andrews had left about a half hour earlier. Well, that's about right. You can run a mile in 15 minutes, and it's about a little over 2 miles from the Lacey Hotel to. But Fuller had to be in pretty good condition, and he did outrun the other two guys. He had to wait for them. So Fuller's group and several of the maintenance crew placed a small pole cart on the track. How many of you saw "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou"? Remember how they had that cart? Well, this one didn't have that. They had to use a pole or their feet, sit on the back and do that. And if you go to Kennesaw or to Marietta, the places I mentioned, they have examples of those pole carts there. So maybe he was a hero. That was kind of heroic. So they used their leg muscles on a pole and poles to propel the cart after the stolen train. So, there were instructions on the track, but they got rid of them. I think the cart turned over once. They put it back on there. But Fuller's persistence and energy drove them toward the bridge over the Etowah River about 16 miles ahead. So you're going to have a downgrade. So Fuller's dogged pursuit likely would have been tempered by the fact that he didn't know, had he known the size and nature of the armed group of engine thieves. The onlookers at Big Shanty told him that there were only 4 people involved, the ones that got on the engine. He didn't know about the 16 in the back who were trained soldiers. The raiders were unaware that they were being chased so closely and determinedly. Andrews was careful to keep as close as possible to the commandeer train schedule because it's only a one track. So he wanted to avoid scheduled southbound trains on the single track, Western and Atlantic. He was in no hurry at this point. Okay, from Moon Station to Ackworth is 4.2 miles. You go up Moon Station Road to Giles Road, and then you take the left on Baker, go down Baker to Moon Station marker, and then you go on up to what is that road? It's Hickory Grove Road. You take a left, and that takes you right into Ackworth. And it's all pretty much back roads, piece of cake. So the raiders didn't stop at Ackworth. The passengers on the station platform wondered why. They didn't stop for them. Ackworth is now a Metro Atlanta exurb, which was in the news quite a bit of late. It has a population of about 22,500 at the census. Tourism associated with nearby Lake Allatoona contributes significantly to Ackworth's economy. The downtown strip offers a number of coffee shops and eateries and a quaint bookstore with a variety of goods, including coffee. And isn't that what you're looking for on a bike trip? You look at places like that where you can do that. Among my favorite are Main Street establishments or Miss L's sandwich shop. She makes them for you right there, which is kind of cool. And the Ackworth bookstore and coffee shop. The owner's father was a World War II veteran, and he has all this memorabilia in there. He was very interested in what I was doing. And, if you go into a bookstore or a coffee shop or a sandwich shop and you park your bike outside with the bags on it and you got your helmet on, your bike and attire, you draw attention. And so you draw conversations and you learn a lot. Some of which you want to dismiss when you walk out because you got to remember where you are. So across the tracks from the downtown strip and along Southside Drive is a repurposed brick building. Let's see, I've kind of gotten behind here. All right, there's the view of downtown Ackworth. And can you see I guess you can't see that. The mouse sitting up there, is it? Yeah. It is? No, it's not. Take a break. Oh, I know. Didn't put the batteries in. Here we go. Any questions so far? What do you do on a day like this? Bundle up. I wrote this route, not this past December, but the one before. And I drove from Auburn up to Marietta, and then rode to, I was familiar with everything, so I didn't have to stop everywhere. So I rode up to Daresville and spent the night. I always stay in a hotel. And then I rode to the end of the chase the next day. So it was 50 and then 57. And then the next day I rode all the way back 107 miles. Aren't they impressed? And I said, are you crazy? I'll never do this again. But because the last part was in the dark, from Ackworth back. And the power went out on my wife's e-bike, which I had borrowed. And that means everything goes down and it's harder to pedal. Yes, sir.
If I heard you correctly, you suggested, implied, or whatever, that Andrews might have been on the payroll of both sides.
And that's what they say. No, he was a spy, not to be trusted. Why had you?
No, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
If I heard you correctly.
There must be a reason why he could convince a Union general to give him that many men, and also be able to ride a train back and forth. You know, see, he had ridden that route several times to plan the trip. Supposed to be a Southern operative also. Brings back bad memories about Vietnam infrastructure. Well, who are they? Well, you know, they're the guys that control the night. You know. See, Miss Ells is right along here somewhere in that bookstore. So, but right across the street here, across the tracks, is this repurposed building. And the architect who has an office in there, he designed it, redesigned it. And so I went in there to see him. This years ago. And so I said, well, I'm interested in this building. He said, well, let me show it to you. And then we were walking into his office, which is toward the back. And up on the door, on the left of the door frame, was this poem. And when I reminded him of that back in the summer this year, he said, I don't remember that. And he had to go back there and look at it while we were talking on the phone. He said, oh, yeah, that's one of my favorite poems. I wonder where that was. So he passed it every day. But go ahead and read that. Pretty good stuff. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Okay, so I wonder if the Raiders would have gone on this trip had they had foreknowledge of what was going to happen, or what would have happened. I think those guys volunteered just to get out of the rain and cold up in Shelbyville and get on with it. And, while they were waiting there for Sherman and those guys to finish, and Grant to finish up out west. And they were ready to do something that sounded like excitement, so they did it. Maybe that'd be my take on it. Okay. So I say here that finding the poem is one example of the unexpected treasures available to adventurous bicycle travelers. I guess you could do that in a car too, but I don't think I'd have found that in the car. But on the bike, it was easy to find him. From Ackworth to Altoona Pass is 5.4 miles on the bike. So from Ackworth, you pass Lake Allatoona on the route, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built the lake between the end of World War II and 1950. The railroad was relocated a short distance west path which was to be flooded for the lake. The approach to the lake is lined with small permanent residences, private recreation areas with cabins, and a public recreation facility offering overnight accommodations, including camping for about $75 a night. That's not exactly a roughing it thing, but a very eclectic mix going up to the lake. At the top of the hill where the railroad track crosses Altoona Pass, and I'm thinking here you're looking at the at the top of the hill where the railroad track crosses Altoona Pass road, look for the fenced grave site marked with the sign "An Unknown Hero." Okay.
Can you see that from the right now?
Yes. But look, you have to look for these things. I'm just trying to share with you some of the things that I happen to run into. Yeah, it's pretty prominent. One reason I found it the first time was because I was on the wrong. So I came at it from a different direction second time. So you can see the railroad, and then just past the trees, that's the lake. So you're traveling north that way. At the bottom of the hill, where the lake borders the route on the east, so you're going down the hill, the lake's on your right. You can find the beginning of the preserved Western and Atlantic track bed path. Let's see. It's my understanding that this is the only part of the route that's like that, that you can get to. It's not on private property. So, but you can only ride about a mile. You have to turn around and come back. You can walk it or ride it. But the Corps of Engineers, you know, they need to hear from us about how important that is, you know, so they keep it up. On the path, note the man-made cut in the ridge that formed Altoona Pass. So it's not a natural thing. It's built for the railroad. And then also look for fortifications associated with the Battle of Altoona Pass in 1864. Sherman went south, and so the Confederates could fall in behind him, you see. So they had stores there, storing up equipment and whatever. So they had to send troops back, and they encountered the Confederates there. And you'll see a sign on that path that shows you where that original unknown hero was buried. He was disinterred when they thought it was going to be flooded. And then there's some historical markers commemorating the Altoona Pass battlefield. I love historical markers. They at least point out, chronicle the past in a way, like silent sentinels. So located on the west side of the road, crossing the lake, is the Clayton House, which I've been told was used as a field hospital during the Civil War, probably on the Chickamauga and Atlanta campaign casualties. It's the only building remaining of the Altoona community of 1862. The present owner is a local historical society leader who may entertain a tour of the house. She said may. It depends on her mood at the time. She's a sweet lady, though. I'm sure she'd take you through there. So from Altoona Pass to Emerson, how many of you have ever heard of Emerson? The mayor of Emerson died recently. He's been mayor forever. An array of travel services aimed at Interstate Highway 75 travelers is located at the intersection of the route and Lake Point Parkway. Fortunately for bicyclers, the vehicle traffic here, although dense and including semis, is slow. Nevertheless, as always, ride with caution. The small town of Emerson, current population of 1,400, was not a stop for the raiders or the pursuers as they approached the bridge on the Etowah River. Okay, so they go down the hill to the Etowah River and on the general, and they see at the Etowah station near it, they see the Yonah, a engine that was being used by Cooper's Iron Works. And the ironworks was about 4 miles, I understand, away to the east, now under the lake. Okay, so it used to run raw materials over there and finished products back to the rail line, to the Etowah station. Right, so they saw it under steam, and they wanted to burn the bridge, but Andrews decided not. Remember, he's a civilian. He's not into this fighting. He's just going to steal, and disrupt. So he decided to go on. And then when Fuller and his crowd finally get down to the Yonah, they take it. They let them know what's going on. They take the Yonah and they start chasing. So now all of a sudden, of course, Andrews doesn't know this, but he's in for a bit of a surprise. I was going to show you on Google's map Cooper's Furnace. Anybody been to Cooper's Furnace? Yeah, I'll show them. Let's see. Gosh, I've forgotten how to do that again. It's not like it was when you showed me. Oh, I see.
That's what I'm here for.
I got you. You're too good. All right, let's see. Let's see. Cooper's. Oops. I have a Macintosh. Old Macintosh. Right? Look at that. Just pops right up. It's just fascinating. I just love this stuff. I'm sure you tell your husband I said that. He's a computer guy, right?
Yes.
There it is. That's quite a sight. Now, I have a question for you. How did they fire it? They had to smelt the iron ore. Iron ore is right there. Carsville's full of stuff. You ride down that road from 293 down to on Old River Road, and there's ochre mines or all kinds of little mines, digging up rare earths. Big mining area. How would they smelt the iron ore? Remember now, Birmingham has all the ingredients for making steel. Okay, so they got all the raw materials there. So how did they smelt the iron ore at Birmingham? What did they burn? Coal. And it takes more coal than iron ore to produce a ton of steel. Anyway, the iron ore moves to the coal. Okay, so Pittsburgh had the Allegheny and Monongahela and the Ohio, and that was the coal region in Pennsylvania. So the iron ore would come there and they'd smelt it. But how did they do it? Did we use coal back in the Civil War? No, they cut trees down, acres and acres and acres of trees. So the hardwood forest has been decimated back in the Civil War days. So, like electric cars are great, but they say it takes a lot of resources to produce them. So anyway, those are just little teaching things you can do when you go to a place like this, and they don't ever forget that, other than, hey, when are we going to eat? So don't tell your husband that. Yeah, it is huge. And yeah, you have to have a person standing next to it. It's worth going to. All these places are worth going to. Right. I was going to say that. No, that's fine. Thank you. Right. Jump in anytime and correct me. It doesn't hurt my feelings. And we want the people here to get the real thing. Yeah, going to see that day use area is worth it. You have a picnic there. You can see. It's really cool. What river is it on, by the way? Yeah, that one. We're at one. Oh, I got to quit.
You can keep going, but if anybody needs to.
You hurt my feelings. Can we go 10 more minutes? 2 more? Okay. All right. quit doing that. All right, let's see. So sorry, then I messed up again. I should go back to the PowerPoint clip, right? This one down at the bottom. Oh, that one. Oh, God. Okay. All right. So the Clayton House. All right, and this is a sign. You can see now they need to trim the bushes so we can read this thing, you know. But it tells about Etowah Station and the Andrews Raid, and it tells about the Cooper's Iron Works. So then you go on up on Highway 293, which is a seldom traveled road, right on into downtown Cartersville. And that's one of my favorite places to go to is the ice cream store. But they also have the Booth Museum there. They have a welcome center, which is in the old depot. And the Etowah Mounds are about 3 miles away. And in the welcome center, they can tell you all this stuff. And then you could go through, as you leave Cartersville on the route, you go right through a beautiful historic district. Okay. And then you get on Highway 293, and that goes to the town of Kingston, which is about 12 miles away. Now, as I was going through this the other night with my wife, I was looking at the Google Maps pictures, and she said, "Oh gosh, don't show them that one." But anyway, it was along the highway. There's not much of a space on there. You got to share the road. There's a creek and then the railroad track, and you're going this way, and the road's a little bit hilly. And then there's some crosses over there where somebody was killed in an automobile. Be alert to that. And, on the way out of Cartersville, they stopped. Andrews stopped to refuel the general. It's running out of wood and water, and so they would have to tell, you know, in these wood stations they were paid by the railroad to serve these things. And there's plenty of wood around, so he had to tell the station manager the story about taking ammunition to General Beauregard, who was supposed to be coming to help defend Chattanooga. So that'd be kind of, especially if you were one of the 16 in the boxcar, wondering, you know, when we're going to get out of here. All right, then you get into Kingston, and when Andrews got there, and there was a train waiting to go to Rome. It was waiting on passengers from the train that he was supposed to be pulling, okay, but they were back at Big Shanty. So he pulled in, and he knew that there was a scheduled freight train coming down. Right, so they had to wait for that train to come down. So he pulled back down, and then that train came in. It was late, and then that train, the engineer told him that there was another train unscheduled coming, and that train came, and they said that there might be another one, but Andrews went on anyway. It was a very tense moment there. So when you go there, go in and have a taco at Two Amigos. It's fantastic. And the lady who owns the place, she is from Chicago, and she'll tell you the story about that. But also ask about what the town used to be. It was the biggest, the busiest station on the Western and Atlantic at that time, between Atlanta and Chattanooga. So that's pretty good. It had hotels, cotton, processing facilities, all of this. Busy place. But ask her now about a large mural depicting the locomotive chase. It's now stored away. She'll tell you about that. And the old townscape, she'll tell you how it used to look. And the recent filming of a movie in town by Billy Bob Thornton, whom she was just fascinated with. So anyway, I'll be looking for that movie. All right, so then they went on up the road, and they would stop from time to time and put out barriers to try to disrupt anybody that still didn't know that the young was coming. Still didn't know. When Fuller got to Kingston, he got the young engineer that was running the train that was going to Rome, the Smith. he got them to uncouple the cars and go around the trains blocking the way north and to chase the general. So, but Fuller, but Andrews didn't know that. So later on, I think that they did hear a whistle and they thought that maybe there was a train following them. So about 4 miles south of Adairsville, they actually disrupted the track and dropped barriers on it. It's my understanding. And then they went on to Adairsville. At Adairsville, they encountered the Texans. And the Texas was on moved onto a side track, but the cars were still, there's a long train that's blocking the north, the way out. So Andrews told the story and reluctantly, and then backed it back up after he left. He told him about another scheduled passenger train that was coming. And he took a chance. And when they got to Calhoun, the Catoosa engine pulling this scheduled train was just about to start, but then heard the general and then backed up and let them by. Right? So they went on, knowing that the last scheduled train had come down, that the track was blocked, the Texas was going that way, so anybody trying to chase them was going to run into that. Well, Fuller knew the Texas was coming, so he ran down, stopped it before the break, and then got it to back up on a couple of cars, and now the chase was on. The chase began with the Texas running in reverse with just the tender car and the general. And then the Catoosa, it's my understanding, they had a Confederate captain that had 10 men under his charge, and they decided to get the Catoosa to join the chase in reverse. So the Great Locomotive Chase is on. So then they get to Calhoun, and then they go to next stop, which would be Resaca. You know, what's the shape of Resaca? It's a round town. And why did they do that? The boundaries around the city of Atlanta started out as a 1 mile radius from what point? The 0 mile post. Yeah, which is it. So go to Underground Atlanta, take a gun. No, go to Underground Atlanta and check it out. People say, you go down to Underground Atlanta? I said, grew up Hateville, man. I'm not afraid to go down there. It's, you know, if you look in the eyes of somebody and they kind of see through you, you know, avoid them. But don't go down there saying things that don't make people upset. But no, it's safe. If you'll. Okay, so round towns, it was because they didn't have money or the time to survey. So they just went out. And then you could see all these broken parts of it. So at Resaca, they crossed the Oostenaula River. Okay, they wanted to burn the bridge over the Oostenaula River as a covered bridge, but they couldn't because they were being pursued. And so they tried to block Fuller by releasing one of the cars. And then they got in the first car, the first box car. So they had an empty one in the second one. And then they dropped off. But they were running reverse, so they just pushed it aside when they got to it. So then they turned, the track turns and goes to a little community called Tilton. It's a beautiful place in that area. Had Andrews raid, and then it had the Atlanta campaign came through, so it kind of raked it over. And then they go to Dalton, and at Dalton, Raiders didn't stop. They just went on through after slowing down, making sure they could get through. But at Dalton, you changed from Piedmont to Ridge and Valley, and so things get a little bit more circuitous route. So when Fuller got to Dalton, he had picked up a telegraph operator from the Catoosa back in Calhoun, and he had come south to try to find out what was wrong with the telegraphs not coming through. So he jumps off and then telegraphs the Confederate Army in Chattanooga. And so even though, you know, Andrews didn't know that. So they go on through, and from Dalton up to Tunnel Hill. And then at Tunnel Hill, they take the risk and go through, tunnel through the mountain there. And some engineering marvel at the time. But then when Fuller came, he got there, he knew they were catching up with him. They could see him. And they went on through, and they took the risk of having an ambush. So they get up to, they go through from Tunnel Hill, they go through the Dogwood Valley. It's a beautiful place, the route through there. And then you have to come back out on the US 41. It's the only way to get into Ringgold. And on the sides of the road, it drops off, and then there are rumble strips. So if you're riding a bicycle, you've got to really be careful. Whoever invented rumble strips and didn't give us 3 more feet, they're the enemy. So anyway, eventually they get to Ringgold, and then you've got the Ringgold depot there that was damaged during the Chickamauga battle. It's a great place to visit. And then 2 miles north of Ringgold, they were captured. All right, so let me just run through these real quick. I'll let you out here in a second. There's the kill at where they had a place called Cement outside of Kingston. It's a ruin. There's the Texas in the Atlanta History Center. There's my wife looking at the mural showing at Adairsville, showing the Texas and the General. So they celebrate that. That's the view from just north of New Echota Historic Site. You know that the Cherokees ride all the way to Oklahoma every year from Red Clay or from New Echota. I think that's fascinating. And they ride on the roads, no trails. There's Resaca and its round town. The view at Tilton. And there's the depot at Ringgold. You know, went into Ringgold and I asked about Andrews raid, and the lady didn't know what I was talking about. That really upset me. Carol looking at that's at the end of the case where they captured them. And the last time I was up there in December, that place was just full of trash. And sometimes you'll see a Confederate flag there, all kinds of things. But I think we really got to push. Is supposed to keep that stuff up, and if we need to give them raises, give it to them. But so what happened to the raiders? Well, they were all caught, 20 of them. 7 of them were hanged in Atlanta together, and one of them being a civilian. And that's discussed about. It was a disgusting hanging. Hanging is disgusting, but this was even more so. And then Andrews was hanged. And did you say that you went to where he's buried or where he was hanged? It's not about the same place.
The execution site is at 3rd and Juniper Street in downtown Atlanta. And the raiders who were hung, they didn't have a hangman that knew what he was doing. So it was a rather gruesome thing. And some of the guys, their feet hit the ground and such. And they were executed at about 100 feet from the Choi or something like that, dining area on Memorial Drive. And there's a monument inside Oakland Cemetery next to the road. Tells about the execution and such.
There it is.
Yes.
Has their names. So 7 of them were hanged there, and then Andrews at a different place. Right. So and they were disinterred in 1887 and put in the National Cemetery at Chattanooga, a great place to visit. When you go there, I'm a veteran. And how many of you are veterans in here? I went to see my grandson graduate from Marine camp at Paris Island, and they said, if you're a Marine veteran, raise your hand. They didn't ask the rest of us to raise their hand. And I was thinking, oh, man. That's the reason Colonel Stephen, well, I can say that. I better not make you mad. But that kind of hurt my feelings. So I asked about everybody. All right. So, but on the north side of this cemetery, you're looking east here. So on the north side, the street that borders the cemetery is Bailey Avenue. So I told Carol that I want some of my ashes put there. And anyway, because I do identify with these guys a bit. So that's it. I'm sorry you couldn't get all that right. What I'll do is those were the eight. I have, if you want the detailed directions on this bike route, text of what I talked about, I'll be glad to share that with you. Just write down my email address. I'll give it to you. Yes, ma'am.
You said that 7 were hanged and then, but originally there were 20 people. What happened to the rest? Were they also hanged?
Well, if you look in Stealing the General, some of them didn't make it to Marietta. I think they had to join the Confederate Army.
There were 20 that were captured at the end.
Oh yeah, all 20 were captured.
I mean, like some of them along the way.
No, there were 24 that left Shelbyville and came to Chattanooga. 2 of them were captured by the Confederates and had to join the Confederate Army. And 2 overslept or something like that, that didn't make the train that morning. So there were 20. But you can read all that. It's really interesting. But the most fantastic thing to me was what happened to the 20 that to the ones that escaped at the end. From jail after they were captured.
But all the ones that were captured and brought back to Atlanta were.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, there were 8 that were hanged. There were some of them that escaped, and some were trained.
Right. It's a good story. Anyway, so my email is WH, then BAILEY at, this is an old one, Prodigy, PRODIGY, prodigy.net.